Okay, 5:36, and we're going to begin the September Civilian Review Board meeting. Before we do, I'd like to welcome Craig, our new police auditor, as well as Elise. You are
Newish,
cleared though, right?
as far as I know.
Yeah,
I hope so.
great. Welcome. Okay, so today we have a crisis intervention training. And then we have a case review on allegations of truthfulness and judgment. But before we do that, we're gonna approve the minutes from July's meeting, if y'all had a chance to review that. Okay. Can I get someone to
Move to approve the minutes
Thank
as
you.
presented.
second? All right,
Oh,
all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
I'm abstaining. So,
Clay?
Yeah.
At this point, we'll move to comments from board members and commission liaisons. Start with you, Clay.
Sure, I've been away for 3 months from Eugene, and so nice to meet, I'll hopefully meet you, Auditor Ransky soon, like in a different capacity, but it's nice to see everybody, nice to meet you, Elise. Welcome to the board. And I'm happy to be back. I will also bundle my report of the police commission, which again, I have been gone for 2 months, but there has been quite a lot of action at the police commission, and a number of commissioners have left the commission. I don't fully understand, having not been there in person, all of the things that I heard, but I know there was quite a lot of testimony about some subjects that I will get more up to date on once and I don't know if the auditor was at any of the previous meetings, or if you received briefings from the previous auditor who might have been there, or Lindsay. But I will try and update you next month when I know more.
Nothing to report for me.
I just wanted to say that I got to meet with Craig and really appreciated the chat and getting to connect as humans and kind of get oriented to what you're bringing to the role. So excited and appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you.
no comment report from you?
My opening comment was to welcome Elise and Craig. I'm excited to have you both joining us. We do need to elect a vice chair, as Carolyn, I believe was our vice chair, is no longer serving. So,
Can I make two?
Yes, please.
Sorry. First of all, I'm just gonna say out loud for people who are listening remotely or in the room. If you would like to make public comment, please fill out the request to speak form. So if you're online, there's a link in the agenda, the online agenda, to take you to a fillable form that you can email to us, and we will check that at 15 minutes into the meeting, but we need to have that so that we know to expect your comment and to get ready for you. So in the next 10 minutes or so, if you can please submit those if you would like to. We do have one request to speak already here for the person who's present, but for anyone online, please fill out your request to speak form. The other thing that I would say is, if we wanted to do our officer crisis intervention training first, before you do your vice chair election, that will get him out the door.
yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Thank you, Lindsay. Can we, I'd like to invite to the table our guests to do officer crisis intervention training.
Where do you want me? Right there?
Right there.
Perfect.
Right there.
Hello, everyone. I don't think I've met everyone. Name is Bo Rankin. Police officer for Eugene. I'm gonna use my whole thing, but I'll let you on. So I came, I'm not sure exactly what you want to hear. So what do you guys want to hear about today?
It had come up in a previous meeting that board members were interested to know the kind of training that officers get when it comes to doing crisis intervention.
Okay.
And so just if you want to give us an overview of the type of training officers receive.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of quick synopsis about me. I've been here almost 19 years, and I've been part of the CIT program since 2009, basically. Been helped run the CIT program since 2014. I'm also a crisis negotiator, which I've been doing for about 13 years. I work downtown mostly, most of my career I've been downtown. So always kind of had this nexus to mental health stuff that's interesting to me. So yeah, back up 2009, EPD started, well, 2008, I think they started forming our crisis intervention team training. So that's what CIT stands for, crisis intervention team. Because it's supposed to be more of a program than a class. So we do 40-hour classes, and that's what I'll talk about a little bit, but it is supposed to be more of a program in general than just a class. That's the way it's structured. So yeah, 2008, the city decided they would do this. I know there was lawsuits and things going on at the time, but they built a CIT class with the community based on the Memphis model, which is out of the University of Memphis. You can look that up online. It's kind of a template for how most places in the United States and even internationally run their CIT programs. So yeah, 2008, they started building it. 2009, we started rolling out classes. We had some classes until most officers were trained in that. Our chief at the time, every chief that we've had since then, has wanted to train 100% of officers in this. So, which is quite a staffing commitment. CIT International recommends that you train 25% of your officers. The idea being that you are going to train people who want to go, who want to do that work, and that you try and send those people primary to mental health related calls. There's some rationale that many of our calls are mental health related. And it's nice to have kind of the majority of our officers trained in that. So there's arguments either way. Let's fast forward, EPD's trained most of our officers. Jump forward to 2014, we got a grant to work with the county and with Springfield and reformulate that and restructure it and bring it back because it had kind of ceased training for a minute. So again, it's a 40-hour class. The model is based on the Memphis model. It's not a specific, you shall teach these things, but there's a breakdown of things that they would like you to cover. We generally stick to that model. So there's a lot of things included. There's local resources. So there's a whole section on local resources. There's usually a section on local courts, stuff on, there are sections on, mental health evals at the hospital, how that occurs at the hospital, how a civil commitment process works. There's usually a good span of the class that is mental health related, where we talk about nowhere in there do we teach people to diagnose, but we want to have officers have an idea what they're looking at. So there's usually somewhere around 8 to 10 hours. It ebbs and flows a little bit of class that specifically talks about what does bipolar look like? What does mania look like? What does a crisis look like? What does someone in crisis look like? So, fast forward to about 6-7 years ago now, maybe DPSST started mandating, I think, 22 hours of CIT related material in the academy and some scenarios. Most departments are still also doing a 40-hour class. Some of it's repeat material and some of it's not. Like, you're not gonna get the local resources at the academy. You're not gonna get how the local ER operates at the academy. And it's a good refresher too, because all these officers are just getting, they're drinking from the fire hose at the academy. And so you get them out on the street, they've been on the street maybe a year or 2 or 3 or 5, hopefully sooner than later, but they get all this refresher information about how to basically de-escalate somebody. So yeah, ideally, every officer in Wayne County gets that class within the first few years or eventually. And then we do a 2-hour refresher every 2 years, I think, which is state mandated as well. I can real quick tell you what our next class looks like. So like, we have civil commitments, emergency department, there's someone from the state hospital is going to come in and talk about that whole process, Alzheimer's and dementia. A couple hours of local services where they come in and sit on a panel. We have a tactical communications class, which is usually taught by a negotiator. Officer Rathje, who is our assistant team lead on the negotiations team, usually teaches that. He's a lot better teacher than I am. And then we do There's working effectively with the LGBTQ community. And then there's, I think at this point, we have 7 hours of behavioral health. Where we talk about, again, what does crisis look like and those kind of things. We do a 4-hour scenario block. We have some veterans come in and talk about their experience dealing with the police or stress. Dan Brown comes in, he's someone from a state insurance agency that deals with a lot of claims around, like when police don't do things perfectly well. Like the city self-insured, I don't think he works for SAFE, he works for someone, I haven't seen this gentleman speak, but I guess he's amazing, so that's kind of a basic breakdown of our 40-hour class. Now, there's agencies that do, Portland does a 40-hour class, and they do a 40-hour advanced academy, where they do mostly scenario-based. The academy, the police academy offers what's called ADEPT, which is a 3-day, it's a 3-day advanced kind of de-escalation class, very optional. We've offered it once here. Springfield's gonna offer it soon. So I'm a big fan of that stuff. Am I taking up too much time here?
You're doing just.
Okay, I will say that CIT is meant to be a program. We have reinstigated having, we have a steering committee that we reinstigated, when I came back from leave a couple of years ago. Because it was something we had not been doing, we've been kind of operating in a vacuum, so we do have a steering committee again. Kind of people bounce around on that a little bit, but it's nice to have some input. The class does change every time a little bit, because we go through and we read evaluations. And we look at how long instructors needed, how much time they needed, how much time they used effectively. And those kind of things, so we restructure every class. No 2 classes look exactly the same, but they look similar. This class is gonna look a lot like the last class that went really well. So while I was on the subject, CIT, I'll just hint real quick on, has anybody heard of House Bill 2575? So-
Yes.
Yes, so House Bill 2575 talked about trauma-informed care. Basically mandated, it says that the state shall offer trauma-informed care training to officers and other elements that go to DPSST. And DPSST has adopted that training into their courses. So they feel like they're covering that, and that we don't need to cover it outside. I think that our behavioral health section in CIT addresses behavioral health from a trauma-informed angle. As far as future training and something, I would like to see us do more trauma-informed specific training, but it's always time and cost and hours and all those kind of things, so. I could rattle on about this all day, but does anybody have any questions?
I was gonna ask about trauma informed care, so
Yeah.
that you jumped on that, just wanting to, this is your personal statement I'm hearing, but like.
Yeah.
To elaborate on what you would want more of and why you would want, like, why it doesn't feel sufficient currently.
I think the academy does a pretty good job of being trauma informed in their education, but again, officers are drinking from kind of that fire hose. And I think that our CIT class also does a pretty good job at looking at it from that angle. But you also have to figure, for instance, you only have to go to CIT once, right? So there are officers at EPD that went through CIT 10 years ago. There's officers that still haven't gone. And so there are officers who went to the academy before it was offered there. So there's a fair element of people who have probably picked this information up along the way, but it would be nice to sort of give them all something digestible that they could all learn. The state mandated the DPSST come out with some guidelines. And so they have on their website, on the Center for Policing Excellence website, they use basically SAMHSA's guideline for trauma-informed care. I just think that, I could give you a whole story, but I think it's just really important that that when I leave that locker room and I put on that uniform and I go out and I do my job, that, I'm expected to sort of push my life kind of over here and go deal with the public. That's normal, but your life's still there. We all have baggage and we all have stuff we're dealing with every day. And so do the people we're talking to on the street. Everybody we encounter has a history of trauma and experiences and things. And so we need to be really aware of where we're coming from today and in general. Like maybe today I'm having a rough day. so I need to be aware of that. And then maybe today they're having a rough day, I don't know, so I don't know what their history is, right? Sometimes you go to these very, low level calls. And the officer gets a little upset, or the client gets a little upset. It doesn't really seem to make sense from the outside, but everyone has their stuff, so I think it's just a really important lens to look at training through. And I've heard it so much, every training I go to the last 10-15 years, trying to inform this, trying to inform that. I didn't even really understand it for a while, but I
Yeah.
think I'm getting a better understanding now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it sounds like it's somewhat about adding content, but more just consistency and like continuing to get refreshed.
Yeah, I wanna make sure that everybody's got that information and that we're all staying on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, anybody can Google, the Memphis model, and there's a PDF that you can download, it's a couple pages that sort of gives the basic breakdown, and we pretty much cover those things. So I think the one thing we're not currently doing is site visits. Time wise, there's a lot to fit into a 40-hour day. We used to take everyone on a bus, and we'd go over to like the Mission, which is a nice visit, or Buckley House, or some of those other places, and it's a nice thing to do, but we found that in general, it's better to have those people come to us and talk to us about those services. The Mission would be a standout. It's a really nice place to go visit, and you get a really nice idea of what they do, but some of the other places that we've gone traditionally are just too crowded and busy and time for us, so stuff. This is my thing, I can talk about this all.
Yes, if I can ask a
Yeah.
question. So, my understanding, so I used to work in Portland and worked on public safety policy there, and my understanding for why they instituted the behavioral health unit was predominantly in response to issues that the department, the bureau there had with uses of force with people with mental illness. And so my question for you is sort of, it seems like this has been a more proactive approach, and whether or not there are sort of annual or semi-annual or every few years reviews of uses of force with people with mental illness to sort of, I don't know, evaluate the previous training and think about new ways of training, because the calls, my understanding is also that the calls that are related to mental illness are continually kind of going out.
Right.
And so I assume that it's a higher percentage. Yeah, I guess what is the responsiveness of the training to the on the ground situation?
I think that in general, that they get that information from these guys, from the IAs. I think that training does a pretty good job of addressing trends, legal trends and training trends. And I think some of that comes from our uses of force, that they're constantly evaluating. From my perspective, as someone who's generally run our CIT program and a leader on the CNT team, I'm not really integrated in any of that process. I'd like to be, but I'm not. Many departments have a CIT coordinator that's very integrated and all that. Where information flows both ways. We don't really have that here. No one reviews our reports specifically for mental health interaction that I know of. I mean, they review use of force reports, of course, but not for mental health interactions. So it's not as robust here in that way. I think that luckily what trickles down to the officers is pretty decent. But I think we could definitely be doing more interaction. And I think that most changes in police work that I've seen over the years at any department are driven by lawsuits and internal affairs investigations of mistakes, accidents. Some of our so what brought us to CIT originally was some incidents that happened, some use of force incidents that happened basically right before I started here, so I can't speak too much to them. Kind of led us down the avenue of having CIT courses and tasers and things like that. I think that we have tried to be progressive over the years, which has served us pretty well. But I think we could be more progressive. Someone at the academy recently told me that, hey, you guys used to be a leader in this stuff, and I don't know if you are anymore.
Okay.
I was like, well, so that's just being honest.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of what trickles down to the officers is really good, but we could do more, so.
Well, and it sounds like other departments have also caught up a little bit.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
the
was
thing.
a newer thing we need to.
CIT was the new shiny thing, and now most departments do that. In fact, I would argue that any department of any size in Oregon has a behavioral health unit at this point.
Yeah.
And a co-responder team and, that kind of integration. So I work on our co-responder team. But again, it's not all integrated very well, different chains of command for each sort of siloed thing.
Mm.
So. Yeah, I wrote a proposal. For having a behavioral health
Hmm.
team. I can share that with you later if you'd like,
Sure.
as I step out.
I
of
think
town.
it's more appropriate for the police commission, which I'm the liaison to, so,
Mhm.
but yeah, that'd be
Perfect.
interesting.
Some ideas.
Can you speak quickly to what the co-responding model is?
Our current co-responder model is, so I'm the officer assigned to it and I have a QMHP, so qualified mental health professional, which is sort of a. Mid-level of mental health clinician.
Master's level.
Yes, pretty high level, but not a doctor.
Yeah,
And I'm just trying to,
as a QMHP.
Yeah. I don't mean to be mid, but I mean, it's a pretty big deal, but it's not a doctor either, so.
It's not. Fine with
And
that.
I work with some QMHAs that are, they don't even have to have a master's, right? So.
Yeah.
Gosh, what was the question? What does it look like now?
Co-responder.
Co-responder team right now. Our mandate was pretty much so I have a QMHP that works with me, every day I'm here on patrol. And, we are specifically focused on downtown, because that was the orders we were given. And our goal was to go out and offer services to people in the community, people who seem to be struggling. So that's pretty much what we're doing. We're not generally going to in-progress crisis calls or troubleshooting any kind of crisis problems across the city. We're pretty much just focusing on high utilizers of services downtown right now. So I don't necessarily agree with that model, but it is a model and we're doing the best we can. You find a lot of these people don't really want services. And I think our initial figures were 55% of people told us to go away. So, but that's still 45% that engaged somewhat, so at different levels, so. And in engaging with one person and making some headway can be a big deal, so.
Do you mind elaborating on how as co-responder team you work with the so the county has the forensic intensive treatment team or the FIT team, folks are familiar and that could be cool to help bridge that gap.
Yes, so the guy that I work with at QMHP, his name's Jose. Jose was on the FIT team, so he's a QMHP on the FIT team. He's still his direct supervision is from the FIT team. And the concept kind of is him and I go out and find someone who maybe is willing to work with us. And we try and get them to sign up with the FIT program, and then the FIT team is supposed to kind of wrap around them and offer them services, which can work really well. If they have the staffing and time and, and people want to participate a little bit. And we have the ability to sort of see those people day in and day out. And like I said, wraparound services that way, so, yeah, and it's just one of the programs at the county. That has some funding to help a bunch of people, so. Yeah. Chronically understaffed, but it is what it is, they're trying.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely, please.
Did you say that you had a target on like a percentage of EPD officers that you had wanted to complete this training? Or what, did I mishear that?
The chief, every chief that we've had has mandated that 100% of officers get through that eventually.
Okay,
And the sheriff and the chief at Springfield have had the same idea. I'm not sure about the smaller departments. They continually send people to the course, but I'm not sure what their goal is. But all three of those departments have wanted to send 100%, and it's been difficult with staffing.
sure.
And the flow, there were points where we were probably 90%. Of Springfield's probably at 90+% right now. We've struggled a little bit, but we actually have a pretty good sized class coming up in October where we're gonna get 20+ people through, I think.
Great.
So that's good. It's good.
So from your perspective, is it right to assume that there's been like broad kind of departmental buy-in to this? A leading question.
Has there been, is there currently, so you're asking me, or has there been?
Yes.
Which one?
Do you see, what is the level of, buy-in you see to this currently in the department?
I am told by my lieutenant and his captain and the chief that they want this done. And that They certainly don't put any barriers in the way of me getting it done except for staffing. And they're supportive of getting me what I need to get it done. So there's buy-in. I guess my hesitation is just that I don't feel like our department has ever really 100% bought into having a CIT program.
Hmm.
In the way that it maybe should operate.
Yeah.
But we're sort of picking up pieces of it, and maybe that's coming, so I'm hopeful there.
Appreciate your candor.
Yeah,
Thank you. We probably have time for one more question.
Can I clarify something on the use of force reviews that you asked about?
Yeah.
please.
So for defensive tactics, as the defensive tactics sergeant, I review every use of force the department has, every single one. I watch the video, I evaluate from that perspective. If there are issues with de-escalation specifically or mental health crisis, I then speak directly to that officer's supervisor. It's documented in a make note personnel file. That's something that Officer Rankin wouldn't have access to, wouldn't be aware of. And that's not knocking both. That's just,
No.
he doesn't have access to that stuff. So we do emphasize that. They sent me as defensive tactics sergeant, they sent me to an advanced de-escalation course. I'm a de-escalation instructor now. So from that perspective and the uses of force, we are noting if, hey, this could have been de-escalated better, we're not going, well, it's too bad. We are noting that. We're evaluating it from that perspective as well.
I guess the question then would be if it becomes a systemic, or not a systemic issue, but like if that feeds back into the overall training for everybody as opposed to individual specific officers.
Sure, yeah, so individually, yes, it's happened. I know of at least one officer years ago who got sent to a different de-escalation school because he had some issues that. I directly speak to the training lieutenant, so defensive tactics is under training. So I speak to him directly and say, hey, here's what we're having, whether or not it's trickled down yet or not. But we do have a direct connection from there to there, and I can speak to him and pass along my concerns, as I said.
And as kind of a line officer, I'm not like, I'm not really included in some of those discussions, because that's not the way it's built in. I maybe would like to have a little bit more information, but I have seen the trickle down effect over the years where I go to some scenario training that our defensive tactics puts on, and I'm like, I can see these scenarios specifically came from some incidents. I don't know whose incidents, but I mean, clearly we're trying to address some training things here, so it's been positive that way.
We still do that with our scenarios with the recruits. They're having all these force scenarios and mixed in is, hey, here's a de-escalation scenario.
Right.
So they just got done with a taser scenario. They're all amped. It's like, no, you gotta talk to somebody in crisis now. Let's see how you do it. So you incorporate that scenario training.
I teach at the academy, and that's the way they do it there now too. They used to do all the de-escalation scenarios on a separate day, so you knew that day you weren't gonna touch anybody. Right? Now they're mixed up, so yeah, you might go from a shooting or chasing someone to like a trespasser who just is having a bad day.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's a better way to look at it. It's not as fun as an instructor, but it's.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your
Absolutely.
time.
Any day. Happy to talk.
Thank you. Okay, if I can invite Lindsay to talk about the vice chair election process and how we've done it in the past.
So historically, the way you've done it is that you, people can be nominated to be vice chair. You may nominate yourself if you want to throw your hat in the ring. And it works similar to how we do the chair elections. So you can accept or decline a nomination. The only rule that's in the bylaws that's a little strange is that it says you should not decline a nomination because you want someone else to win. So if you're willing to accept the nomination, accept the nomination, and then you may all vote for whoever you want to vote for. You may also vote for yourself. There have been just shows of hands votes. There have been writing down on paper votes. It's whatever people feel most comfortable with. But I would say you could open the floor to nominations for vice chair. This has been done at very varying times of year. It's been done at the July meeting, it's been done at the September meeting, it's been done at the January meeting, it's been done at the June meeting. Sometimes it depends on who's cycling off. Sometimes it just, there's so many, different times have been tried. We have not found the perfect answer, but here we are in September in need of a vice chair. So we will hold an election, just if you're wondering why now, because Carolyn cycled off and now we go.
And how long are they gonna be serving so that when they get the
Typically,
need to?
typically people serve for at least a year, and usually the chair and the vice chair sort of co-lead and can switch off back and forth if the chair needs relief. And then oftentimes the vice chair becomes the chair, not always, but oftentimes it's sort of a pathway to that kind of role. So if you want to open up to nominations, then you can all decide if you want to do secret votes or you just want to vote at the open.
So let's open the floor to some discussion. Does anybody feel especially called to serve the community as the role of vice chair of the Civilian Review Board for the city of Eugene?
I didn't do that on purpose.
Okay.
If no one else wants to, I would gladly defer to anyone else, but I have chaired boards before, city boards before, so it's not new territory for me, although the CRB is obviously new. But unless anyone else. All right, I'll throw myself in.
Okay. We have a nomination. Is this something that you would like to stew on and table this discussion to November? Maybe you'll go home tonight and feel especially called, or do you think you are individually at a point where we could open the floor up to a vote and get some business done?
I think that's fine. I think so long as at least if you're feeling competent, and also like, I think part of it is, as I've observed, part of it is sort of learning the ropes also as you're doing that with the chair and, I mean, running a meeting, you probably have a lot of experiences, so that's probably not the issue. It's more about the content and how it's organized.
I'm a quick
But
study.
yeah, sounds like it.
The only other
Um,
thing that I'd say in full
yeah.
disclosure is that there are slightly more time requirements for the chair and the vice chair. So
Yeah, that's
typically, they meet like once a month with the auditors or auditor staff and do case selection and discussion, or if there's mid-month things that come up to like set the agenda or different things like that, that is slightly more. So I don't wanna, I want it to be truth
Thank
in
you. I appreciate
advertising
that.
that it is slightly more work.
Yeah, if all that, I mean, from my perspective as an individual board member, if all that seems kosher, then I would be happy to have the discussion now or the vote now. I don't know.
Same.
Yeah,
Are you moving to vote?
sure. Yeah, I move to elect, wait, should I nominate? No, you've not self.
Nominated.
So can I move to elect Elise as vice chair? And need a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Any post, just for the minutes taker, sometimes it's hard to see, okay.
Abstentions.
Unanimous, okay.
Thanks, Elise.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Elise.
To do you all proud.
We have time for, we are making very good time, so I would say let's take a 5-minute break. Meet back here at 6:16. Exactly.
Right, I'm gonna pause the recording.
Go into our round of discussion.
So I'm pretending to be Rob today, because usually don't want to give you your case summary, I'm gonna do my best. And so, alrighty. So your thing's supposed to do. Move this just a little to the corner. So today we're looking at a case, I believe this case was chosen by Monique, which was vice chair, before she cycled off. This is a case that has allegations related to truthfulness and judgment during a traffic stop and then a subsequent DMV hearing. So I organized this just a tiny bit different. This case is a little bit confusing. There's several officers involved. I will absolutely do my best, but I apologize if there hurts. On February 11th of this year, Internal Affairs received an email from City Prosecutor's Office surfacing concerns that the testimony Officer A provided during a DMV hearing was inconsistent with the body worn video recorded at the time of the traffic stop. Traffic stop happened in November. We'll get to that. On February 13th, the case was classified by interim auditor Gissner as an allegation of misconduct. So the summary of facts, in November of 2024, Officer A pulled over a car that they'd seen leaving the area of a party and then observed swerving and making improper lane changes. Officer D arrived to provide cover and recognized the passenger as a juvenile that was part of an ongoing investigation being conducted by Officer B. After speaking with the driver who was seated in the car, Officer A returned to their vehicle and began issuing a citation for failure to maintain a lane. While Officer A was processing the citation, additional officers arrived and made contact with the driver and passenger. Officer B requested the driver exit the vehicle and began asking her questions about the other incident he was investigating based on his observations. He believed she was intoxicated and assisted in having Officer C begin a DUI investigation on the driver. Officer C began the investigation on the driver, including field sobriety tests. After failing field sobriety tests, the driver was transported to EPD to conduct a breath test for alcohol that was ultimately cited for DUI. During the DMV hearing, regarding her suspended license, that's what the DMV hearing was for. Sorry, I didn't put that in the notes. Officer A stated that he noticed signs of impairment when he approached the door during the initial stop. So he stated in the body worn video that the driver's speech was quote unquote relatively clear and did not initiate a DUI investigation at the initial time of approaching the car. So the allegations, there were a lot of other things going on in that case. I tried to pare it down to like these specific allegations, but we can get into the other things that we're going on to. They're also sort of procedurally interesting. There were two allegations that were leveled. One was truthfulness, that Officer A provided testimony before the Office of Administrative Hearings for the State of Oregon Department of Administrative Hearings for the Department of Transportation that were inconsistent with statements made to officers at the scene of a traffic stop. And then judgment that Officer A failed to make decisions and take action on a suspected DUI traffic stop that a reasonable employee in similar circumstances would use or take, given the information they knew or should have known at the time. So, usually we kind of go through that stuff and then I think, you all talk through a few key points. I'm just through this slide in here, so in terms of like it's a little bit out of order, but in terms of adjudication recommendations, for the truthfulness allegation, the auditor found not sustained. The EPD chain of command and the chief said insufficient evidence. For the judgment, it was within policy, was the auditor's recommended adjudication insufficient evidence for the EPD chain of command and the chief. So the materials that we were provided you to review, as always, body worn and in-car video footage, the IA Pro report detailing the investigative process, all the correspondence that was related to the complaint, including internal correspondence like emails and such, the adjudication recommendation memo from the chain of command and the auditor, and then all related reports and records, including the DMV hearing transcript. And I think we also had the recordings of all the interviews that were conducted, and then relevant EPD policies. So these are the items for CRB discussion. Usually you go over the complaint intake, classification, monitoring, relevant policies, practices, and training considerations, and then adjudication recommendations. And I'm happy to put those back up on this slide if it's helpful. So with that, you guys, would you like me to stop sharing, or would you like me to keep these?
I should keep the matrix up
Sure,
for.
Yep. No problem.
Thank you.
Yep, there you
Okay,
go.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay, normally we do our discussions in a set of, along a set of, topics that Lindsay outlined. And we normally switch, who goes first in a kind of round robin fashion. And that would put Elise first this time, but, as it's your first meeting, I don't want to put that on you. Ask if you will,
Yeah.
open the list.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes. For intake, classification and monitoring.
And general comments.
So yeah.
Oh,
so
general comments first.
comments.
There's-
Yep.
My general comments, first, I will say, usually I feel pretty thoroughly prepared for these conversations, and just given my travel until last night, I feel less prepared than normal, so I will talk where I feel prepared and I will abstain from talking about stuff that I don't feel prepared. Generally, I think this is sort of an interesting case to look at for nuance and the complexities of a police officer's job. dealing with in the moment, action and real-time changes in how you perceive a situation while trying to think through the legality of every kind of action that you do. And so I think it's helpful for us to review this particular case for that reason, because as we'll probably talk about more, some of the officer's actions sort of fall into a challenging area of not maybe knowing or making decisions related to the like strict legality of how things should be done. So I just think it's a window into the complexity of the job. That's what I'll start with.
Yeah, I guess I'll say, complaints seem to be pretty fleshed out, seem to have a lot of detail, which I think I appreciated. I felt like I was able to parse through it more quickly because of the detail. General comments, we'll get obviously further down. I am struck by how different the officers on scene statements in the Office of Administrative Hearings for the DMV was. They seemed fairly far apart to me personally.
Thank you, Lisa.
Are we doing general comment and intake and classification? Did I miss?
I did not do that.
Why don't we do a round of general comments and go into that one?
My only general comment is I have noticed now being a year in that I have gained an instinct to consider how the human being of the officer might be interacting in the situation and how that's factoring into what I'm reading. And I appreciate our EPD representatives for like helping to teach me to do that. So that was present with this case.
Thank you.
I don't think I have a general comment that would shed any new light.
Thank you, Noah. I think that the density of this case is not typical. There was a lot here. It's extremely dense. Not just in terms of the amount of documents, but this is one of the cases been here 5 years now, that I've had difficulty keeping up with. I had to take kind of extensive notes on my own just to follow, the auditor's, report, which I found to be sloppy, inaccurate, and unacceptable as far as auditor reports have been. I just want to point out that not sustained is not a category for adjudication definitions. And we need to have a discussion, or at least at some point, maybe ask Lindsay about what that means and how to read it. And I also want to say, for the folks that are listening, the auditor's report was not written by Craig. And I also want to say that I appreciate Lindsay and Rob and Beatrice and Amanda for their work in putting together a really great case book that helped me get through the density of this. But I just want to note that not happy with the auditor's report, and we'll want to talk about that. Thank you to the IA folks for also doing difficult work here. We're gonna have a difficult conversation. There's no way around that, and it always helps to have a well-written item report. So thank you. Now we can do a round on complaint intake, classification, monitoring, and we'll ask you to start, Elise.
Sure, I think I covered most of my complaint intake thoughts. Obviously coming from where it came from, it has a bit more meat on the bone than I'm sure a lot of other complaints might. It was pretty thoroughly thought out, I think. And then I obviously my first meeting, I'm hoping this has not become a trend. I'm hoping this is maybe kind of a one-off case around this particular interaction. This is for me, when I see this level of tension between the city prosecutor, police department, city prosecutor's office and the police department, that is concerning to me. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, my only observation is I wanted to clarify as the city prosecutor, because I remember and just appreciate, because I don't think we've seen that yet here that I've been here, so.
Oh, we had one.
Well, I don't remember if we did.
You had one from the DB.
There we go. Yeah, it's like, look, who's there? I don't think there's anything, other than, as we all said, was extensive, and I do think this was the first that I've seen of anything coming out of an administrative law court, which is its own thing, so. Yeah, thank you for doing your best.
I want to give a shout out to Monique. You see this, Monique? It was a great case. And this, in terms of intake, came from Monique. Is that not intake?
In terms, yes, Monique is the one who
Selection.
selected this.
Yes.
Yep.
I thought that it was classified in terms of the allegations correctly, and just want to note that like their stakes of a truthfulness and judgment allegations are high, so we don't do a lot of these cases. It puts a lot of mental weight on everybody involved, and nevertheless, I think it was right to go through with this.
Yeah, I agree. So coming from the city prosecutor's office, you know, it brings in the whole reason that truthfulness is important to the police department is because they have to, you know, be in a court and be telling the truth about the incidents that they were involved in. And so I can understand why this case went through and why it needed to be investigated to the depth that it did. When there's concerns about that from, you know, prosecutor's office. So that is great that we're looking into them. I found the monitoring of that investigation by the auditor's office to be good. And yeah, the classification I think is appropriate for the sort of concern that was raised by the prosecutor's office.
Lindsay, before we go on, do you happen to know how many let me get this straight. Was the can we clarify who initiated this or who submitted this complaint?
So that's a great question. I would have to look at the file to tell you
Okay.
how it got to us. John, do you happen to recall how it came through the system? I don't remember if it came directly to our office
It was
or
emailed to Cindy.
email to Cindy.
Yeah.
And
That was
email-
the first document, was the
Yeah.
email.
Thank you, thanks.
Yeah.
So like, to the previous internal affairs supervisor, and then we were brought in through that process.
So was it from the email from a judge that said or the city attorney who said,
City prosecutors.
I can't put this person on the stand because,
Yeah.
and that was the,
That went to Cindy and then Cindy brought us in.
Okay.
Just the way that came up, that's fine.
Can I clarify that statement? The city prosecutors said, well, correct me if I'm wrong, did they say I can't or I'm concerned about?
Concerned.
Okay,
It was.
and I think that's important for the record to
Yes, I
say.
think it's the city prosecutor who sent the email, but that it was there was another attorney in the office who had reviewed the case and highlighted the concern. So it
Yes.
kind of went up the chain.
Right.
Came over and then we were involved.
There's a concern about like a Brady disclosure problem.
and I guess where I'm leading with this is how often do we get these initiated from the city prosecutor's office?
I don't remember one. My memory isn't eternal. I do remember that there was. It's not, no.
Common.
But it's not common.
Okay.
We did have one within sort of recent memory that came from the DA's office that was sort of similar concerns, right? You all remember we reviewed that one. It was also a truthfulness concern. Those are the only two that I can remember, let's say within a decade, but there could have been others that I didn't track.
Yeah, okay. All right. Our next round of discussion will be on relevant department policies, practices, and policy training considerations. Can you start us off, Brittany?
I can. I just have a bunch of questions typically. One question I had was, I was curious if there's a policy or just even a best practice regarding how to know which officer handles what. When there's multiple officers on the scene and then multiple incidences and potential crimes or violations at hand, like, I know that's a really large question, but is there general standard guidance around that?
So if an officer is conducting a separate investigation, such as the case in this one, the officer that initiated that investigation would be the foremost knowledgeable person for it, and which is why another officer was called to handle that particular investigation, one separate from this traffic stop. So generally, we want to have the person with most knowledge there to conduct their investigation. And so that's why another officer was called in for that.
And I'm not remembering correctly, what, there's another officer called in specifically for the DUII investigation or related to the other similar incident?
Related to the other similar incident.
So I guess I'm curious that, maybe Officer A is maybe who I'm talking about, who opted to not initiate the DUI evaluation. And then a different officer did. I guess in that scenario, there maybe wasn't one officer that necessarily had more information or knowledge than another, because they're both pretty fresh on the scene. Is that fair?
For the DUII portion of the investigation, there was a brand new officer that was still in what we call FTEP.
Uh-huh.
And that officer was asked to assist with the DUII investigation and for training and experience for that investigation.
Okay, so that was my second question, was how does that best practice change when there's a training officer or recruit officer present? So it's to give them the chance to, okay. And then there was also a cadet present in the vehicle. And does that change anything about it?
Cadets are volunteers and they just ride along with officers.
And that wouldn't change who and how the officer would decide kind of who to take what? To give them a good experience for their observation, okay. Thank you. And my last question is there a policy around when the body worn video footage can be muted? I was confused about why that was muted, and what I remembered reading was just that it referenced they put it on mute, but I didn't understand why.
They're allowed to mute it to protect their tactical discussion so that information doesn't get out. You could have explained that, I'm sorry.
He's doing great. I appreciate it.
I had a lot of issues with that.
Okay. And that's just officer discretion on when it's determined as tactical.
If they're having a tactical discussion that needs to be private, then they're going to either.
Okay,
There is a policy about muting when you can and can't do it, and what you should do before you mute and all that stuff, so that is a policy.
Mhm.
In this case, there were not any allegations leveled about.
Yeah.
muting,
okay,
But there have been other cases where you have seen
uh-huh.
those types of allegations.
Okay, cool. Thanks, I don't have any recommendations, just had questions. Thank you.
I just had a question in my mind and I left immediately. It's gonna come back to me in about 20 minutes. I guess this question, officer. The complaint came in saying that the discrepancy between the testimony and body worn footage, and I don't recall from the many pages. If they showed any sworn or were in administrative hearing, if they even requested the report or any type of affidavit, if there's policies that officers need to review what occurred on their footage before writing those up, so that they can ensure any type of consistency. So I suppose that was my question. Is that a practice that officers tend to do, or do they just record and then write up the reports or write up an affidavit based on their own memory?
Ooh, that's a long question as well. So it's best practice for an officer to review their body camera before writing the reports when that is possible. But given time frames, loading and uploading and downloading, all the different things, that's not always able, always going to be able to happen, so.
I think that was mine.
We can't review them instantly, so you take your body worn camera, you take it back to headquarters, you have to put it in the dock. It then remotely uploads, you wait for it to upload, then you pull it up, and then you write your report, so that if you've worked a 12-hour shift and you have 15 videos, it can take quite a long time to upload, so you're just sitting there waiting. In the meantime, if you have good notes, you have a good recollection of what occurred, you can write your report. A lot of officers, and considering with report writing, a lot of officers have put kind of a disclaimer saying this report is, to my best recollection, I have not had a chance to review body worn camera for a full recollection of the event seen by them. So we've discussed that, figuring what the best practice will be going forward for that.
Thank you. I think that was the biggest thing pop up in my mind.
Okay, in terms of policies, I think there's a lot that I would want to talk about, but, I'm gonna try to keep my comments to one particular section here. Okay, so on page 20, what is this? 2 of the IA report. All right. I'm sorry, that would be 21. I'm gonna read from the last 2 paragraphs. Thank you. Can I
Yep,
refer
that's
to that?
Officer A. Yep.
Yes. I'm gonna read slow to try to be conscious about that, and pronouns as well. I asked, looking back, how, if anything, would they have changed their actions during the traffic stop? Officer A stated that the stop had multiple people doing multiple things. Looking back, it would have been simpler and clearer had they taken one thing at a time. Officer A had ended their stop and allowed a new investigation to take over. It would have cut back on multiple things being done at the same time. I asked what, if anything, would they have changed about their testimony during the DMV hearing. Officer A stated they would have eaten something. They also would have tried to be as clear as possible. They testified in a circumstance where there were 4 officers present and only 2 officers were at the hearing. Officer A also commented that the DMV hearing was conducted over the phone. Officer A stated it would have been nice to have all 4 officers present. Officer A walked away from the hearing and thought it had been unclear. Officer A would have liked to have been clearer. I asked Officer A about the comment they made that they would have eaten something. I asked if they were their best self when they attended the hearing. Officer A stated they would have had better sleep. They mentioned before that their sleep schedule was rough and that the hearing was in the morning hours of the weekend. Officer A surmised they would have felt better if they had been well hydrated, well rested, and had breakfast. Okay. From the auditor's adjudication recommendation, and this is going to be on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last full paragraph. The auditor says this about, this is the reasoning that the auditor came to the conclusion of not sustained. There were multiple transactions in motion here, perhaps not the greatest coordination and certainly not communicated well in the administrative hearing. In fact, Officer A's testimony in the administrative hearing was far less than precise and linear. They were also faced with being asked compound questions, statements rather than questions from the judge, the defense attorney, and not having counsel on their side to sort these issues out more clearly. There's a lot of reasonings going on here as to why there's a discrepancy, and I'm not sure that I buy any of them. I would like to stress that what they do agree on, though, is that there were some coordination issues during the arrest. In terms of policy, Could I ask about how this should or might have been coordinated, or if it was with, or if what both the auditor and Officer A are mentioning, if that is within the policy for this kind of stuff?
I'm sorry, if what's within the policy.
They both said that, they both seem to say that it's like really uncoordinated. There was 4 officers and some things got lost in the shuffle. And I'm trying to, I'm not sure, I guess I'm unclear as to where it went wrong and like. If this is if this is a thing that we can recommend in terms of policy, like breaking a particular stop down in terms of steps, if that kind of policy already exists. Where did you, if I could ask you, where do you see the breakdown here in terms of like procedure?
Sure.
That at the scene?
I think where a large piece is missing are the 2 officers that were not included in the testimony for the, DMV hearing. So you have one officer who's the, training officer for one of the recruits.
Yeah.
Is that,
He-
sorry, is that? I'm sorry to.
Yeah,
it would-
I can tell you.
use-
So Officer C was the recruit, Officer B was the training officer for the recruit, and Officer D was the one who was there with Officer A as the cover officer initially.
Yeah.
I
Sorry to-
know that that's
Yep,
very.
that's fine. So which one was the officer?
Officer C was the training officer, Officer B was the.
Yeah. So Officer C would have been helpful because Officer C is the one that kind of conducted the information or relayed information from one to another. And then Officer D would have been helpful for the extension of the stop. Which was not available to the DMV. Because there was no one there to testify to that specific thing. So all these things come into play with something like you had mentioned about the legalities that have to go on in the minds of the officers during something as simple as a traffic stop. Is all these different little pieces, everyone played a different part in there. And by only calling half of the people, you get half of the part. And so sometimes you miss important pieces of a puzzle if not everyone's there to kind of put their piece in.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my question is if that explains the discrepancy in the record and the recall.
Oh, for the involved officer?
Officer A.
I'm not an officer, he's mine, I apologize.
No, that's, yeah, I think that's what, one of the things that I'm thinking about here is, as I was trying to parse that out. That was very helpful in helping me get there and. I think I need to think and hear what you all have to say also. Sorry, I know that was a lot, Clay.
No, that's
Can
fine.
I ask one clarifying question to build off? Why were the other 2 officers not called or they opted out, or how does that happen?
So, I don't know, other than when the DMV subpoenas go out, they subpoena specific officers, maybe with their supplements. And not every officer that existed at the thing, and so some officers might not have even known that the DMV was hearing was happening. And then some officers. If they're not subpoenaed, they guess they technically don't absolutely have to show, the ones that were subpoenaed have to show.
Yeah, okay.
Can I provide some clarity on DMV hearings? Do you guys want clarity on DMV?
Yes,
hearings?
please.
Okay. So DMV hearings, when somebody's arrested for Dewey, their license will be suspended. If after a DMV hearing, if they go to the DMV hearing, so the DMV hearing is it's an administrative hearing, it is not a court of law. So what will happen is the person who's arrested will be there, their attorney will be there, and an administrative law judge will be there. The officer is there, the officer does not have the benefit of having a city prosecutor to redirect or to clarify, to ask clarifying questions. So especially as a newer officer, you show up for this DMV hearing and you are completely overwhelmed because you have a judge asking rapid fire questions that you may not know all the answers to. You have a defense attorney who essentially can do a fishing expedition. So when we have major traffic related crimes that have Deweys, sometimes we will not have officers even go to the administrative hearings because we don't want the defense attorneys to get a free shot, essentially, at questioning this officer, digging all this information up that may not actually shouldn't be available. So we will tell them, hey, let's not go to the DMV hearing. We don't care about the license suspension. We're worried about a Dewey manslaughter. You talked about he mentioned the sleep thing. I'll speak to that as a guy who worked graveyard for 5 years as a canine handler. I remember a DMV, or not DMV, an actual circuit court hearing I had for a DUI. The person was a .10. They were clearly drunk as a skunk. I arrested her. It was a righteous arrest. I got off the stand. I didn't know where I was. The guy turned me in knots. And I got off there going, I don't know if I lied or not. I don't know what the heck I just said. Because you're coming off graveyard, you're completely sleep deprived, you have no idea what you're doing. So to prevent that, when we have our internal affairs class, for new recruits, we have talked to them. I specifically call out now, like, do not go to court if you are coming off a graveyard shift. Call out sick, call out on vacation, call the court, call the prosecutor, like, do what you can. Like, going and testifying under oath when you're completely sleep deprived and exhausted is a really, really bad idea. So that going forward, we're trying to reiterate that, like, kind of this health of the officer thing, like, be your best self when you go to these. I think focusing on that going forward can alleviate some of this. And some of the questions that you're asking Gene hearing, at what point did you have probable cause? That is such a precise, on 99% of the duties I ever worked, and I worked over 100. Well, I don't know, like somewhere along the lines here, I discovered he crashed into a car. You know, there'd be times someone would crash into a tree, you walk up, they'd be covered in their own pee, you go, okay, I have probable cause right then. Other times you walk up and it takes a bunch of questioning. So it's really kind of this fluid, when is there probable cause? Or did you have probable cause right at that moment? The best answer is probably, I'm not sure, it kind of depends. So they're all different. Sorry, I kind of went off there, but.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful.
yeah.
Please.
Sorry, and just to clarify the subpoena that I was talking about, the subpoena is issued by the courts, it's not issued by the officer. And generally, if you have representation, so if the prosecutor is there to assist, the prosecutor would review the entire case and issue out the subpoenas for people that they would find important. You're not gonna get the same overview from a DMV hearing judge or defense attorney, right? So they're going to subpoena the people they think played the part that's important for the information they want. They're not thinking necessary about everything else. And so as a newer officer, and this had happened to me where I showed up and they were like, where are your witnesses? And I was like, what? I had to subpoena my own witnesses. I've never had to do that before. They're like, welcome to DMV hearing, yes. And I was like, well, I am ill prepared to move forward. I lost that case. And it was just because I learned something that day. Never done it again, right? But I learned something big that day. So.
While we're on the subject of the administrative court, can I ask another question? So my understanding is that the case was lost here, not because of probable cause, but because of detention. Is that true? Like the period between both probable causes and the length of that period as not being applicable or not being.
From my understanding
allowed.
from my understanding of what the judgment was and the opinion from the judge, the
Yeah.
administrative judge,
Yeah.
was that they felt that what you said
Yeah.
was the law.
Yeah, so I guess my take on the complexity of this situation and the interview with with Officer A and the allegations and investigation into judgment and truthfulness is that in fact, in court, the testimony that Officer A gave provided enough information to the judge to allow the judge to consider that their probable cause for issuing a DUI could have been there, but also they chose to issue a citation and that could have been the end of it. And like that sort of was wrapped up. And then there was a second probable cause from Officer C, who actually initiated the DUI investigation. And that also was done appropriately. And it's really the period between the two. And that caused an issue for this case. So then in reviewing that whole administrative hearing, the city prosecutor has concerns with the version of testimony that occurred orally at the hearing versus what Officer A reported and sort of documented in their report from the incident on site. So the issue that we're sort of concerned with in terms of these allegations is the report and then the Officer A's report and then Officer A's testimony. And while I agree with Jose that the report from the auditor's office could absolutely have been more professionally or. Yeah, professionally written, I'll say. I think there is some validity in this idea that information was gained by Officer A over the course of time, especially preparing however they could for a hearing, that their testimony may be slightly different than the written report. Especially if they weren't able to review, and I don't know if they were, but weren't able to review body worn video before the report, but then they were able to review it before the testimony, and they also had this other DUII amount of information that was investigated by Officer C before the hearing, but after they had closed out their own citation. So to me, there's like lots of room for discrepancy. I think as a human, there's lots of room for discrepancy. So my policy and training question, or maybe comment, would be more about how do you prepare officers for that complexity, especially when it comes to testimony in all sorts of venues where they are at risk of saying something even slightly different than what they wrote in a report or what they previously said in the testimony because they're underfed or tired or whatever they are, a human being. So I think the lieutenant, right? Acting lieutenant, maybe future lieutenant, mentioned, one thing that you are recommending is to, be very careful about when you provide testimony. Are there other ways that this case sort of highlights other training or policy issues that you understand to be working or not working related to that role of like preparing to go from having done a report to testifying?
So DPSST has a class in courtroom testimony where you actually have to go up and they set up a little courtroom, kind of like this conference room, and you have to testify and bring your peers. That's a little bit of acting. The stress inoculation of that, there's so much stress inoculation as a cop that you have lots of cops who can deal with running towards gunfire and all the dramatic stuff you talk about. If they were sitting in this chair, they would freeze. They would not be able to speak to you guys right now. So I think stressing in FTAP, the importance of reviewing your report, reviewing your video. And even phrases like the best that I can remember, right? That's not a cop out when you're testifying. If you say, hey, the best that I can remember, this is what happened. It's not a cop out, it's true. Sorry to bring my own cases. I went to a federal trial and got postponed twice for COVID and ended up going like 3 or 4 years after the incident. And they're asking me what occurred, and I'm like, well, based on the body worn camera, here's what occurred. I didn't have independent recollection of it. So continuing to reinforce to our officers that you don't have to speak in absolutes if you don't have them. It's okay to say, I think this is what happened, I'm not sure, it's not a cop out. And I think a lot of them feel internally this pressure, you have this definitive answer, this is when I had probable cause. And reinforcing them like, you can say, I think this is when I had it, I'm not sure. There's some sort of internal pressure to be, this is when I had it, and I know this because I'm cop. So it's just a training issue. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I know some officers are trained to read the reports, like just read it and on
Like before you.
during testimony.
Yeah, the report.
Yes, that's what I do. I read my report on the stand.
I see.
And in fact, when a defense attorney's asked me a question, I was like, what page are you on? And then we get on the same page and I'll read literally the paragraph that they asked me a question about it.
Just to protect yourself and
Well, I
the
mean,
integrity of the.
Because that's what I wrote. I wrote it
Yeah.
for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm under the impression that's still being trained. The hard part is when people start, like administrative judges and attorneys start asking questions that are outside the bound or the box of the report you've written. And you are basing it based off of what I remember the day of, what I remember from watching video, what I remember from my report, and now I'm trying to do the best I can, and you're not using clarification or clarifying words to get everybody kind of on that same page. But
Okay. Sorry, I have 2 more questions. One is about, and I know you just explained this, but I'm still a little confused about subpoenaing people to be at that hearing. And does that come from the judge or the administrative official who is doing the administrative hearing in that case, or does it come from the city's Auditor, city attorney's
I'm
office.
trying to remember, it comes from the DMV, I believe, right?
Okay,
It's not from the city attorney's office.
okay, so the city attorney is almost not involved at all in those administrations. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is helpful because I think one of the biggest, I don't know, tragedy is too big for word, but the outcome from this that I'm most disappointed in is that the person who was driving under the influence did not have their license suspended, which makes me feel like our community is less safe. And, you know, yes, that occurred potentially in a little bit of a gray area because of a lack of ability for police to detain that individual between a citation and then a new investigation of DUI. And my thought on that is that the judge mentions that they would have liked to have had additional testimony from additional officers, but it was like their fault that there weren't additional officers there. So the policy or training question actually is more citywide about like, should the city attorney's office, is there a mechanism for there to be more support for officers going to that? I know that's more funding and more people and all of that, but like, is that totally out of the question? Or could we consider as a city to provide resources like someone from the city attorney's office to be there with an officer at administrative hearing so that a person who, so that this doesn't happen again, I guess.
I don't know the answer.
You don't know yet, okay, fair enough. I guess. Are there conversations about that amongst officers, especially those of you who have been to administrative hearings without support? Do you understand why? Like, is there, I don't understand why, so I'm wondering if you have an understanding of why that is, how it works.
It's always just been presented as
That's just how it is, yeah, and I hate that.
I-
That's a system. It's not here, I'm not saying that's,
There's a frustration amongst police officers in general at the intricacies and the roadblocks in conducting DUI investigation.
yeah,
For a misdemeanor, it is the most follow A, B, C through Z, and if you screw up one letter in the middle, their suspension's going with the window.
yeah,
And it is so frustrating for officers to do that, and you're going, man, I was a righteous arrest, that guy was a 1-3 and they crashed, I got
Yeah.
him off the road, and it's like, yeah, well, they're driving next week because.
Yeah.
The horizontal engagement stagnus was not. You know,
Yeah.
district, yeah, within training.
well, I will say, for the record, with having had family members almost die in these kinds of accidents that happen from drunk drivers, I think that is something that the city should consider how we can better, I mean, the city is not the entity that regulates this, but how can we better support our officers to support the investigations that they've done to try and continue, to try and make sure that those suspensions hold. So, hopefully, I don't know, whoever's listening.
I got some more for you. I'll be pretty quick though. Do you have any sort of like what on the military side we call like a crew rest policy or like a pre-court rest policy of no? Okay. What I expect. And then I was also struck by the administrative law judge's opinion. They concluded that I know you all don't have it in front of you, so I'm gonna read it out loud. Bottom of 6, top of 7 of the opinion,
The adjudication.
of the opinion, of the administrative law judge. Had the probable cause been communicated to the other officers, they could have continued their investigation under the collective knowledge doctrine, and that communicated probable cause would have allowed the officers to inquire about, and then the other incident. I guess, any kind of policy around handing off the stop. Whenever I see a judge saying like, hey, we could have done more, had the officers just talked a little. I guess that feels like a miss to me. I'm wondering if there's any policy about, and I'm also cognizant that sometimes we don't want to make everything a policy, sometimes it's like a on the ground, but. Any policy about what to pass on, what not to pass on.
Again, I think what I would emphasize in this opinion is it's still only half of what we have, right? Like if they had a legal reason for the stop, you wouldn't need that. And if that legal reason for the stop was somebody else's investigation, then we were there. That said, I don't know of a policy specifically stating what factors need to be relayed from one person to another. I know oftentimes people will generate their own probable cause. I also know probable cause can change drastically if someone is seated versus standing.
Sure.
Right? Because your body and blood will react differently when there's 2 points of pressure on the ground versus a seated position, right? So all these different things come into play, and maybe somebody seems different in one venue than another.
Thank you. That I got.
Brittany, did you start off last time? It was a long round. Okay, adjudication recommendations,
Great.
Noah.
My favorite, I love being on stuff this, no, I don't. I thought about this a lot throughout the day, and of course. It's all left me now. In regards to the truthfulness. And this was something to justify. I am leaning more with the EPD with insufficient evidence, just based off of the factors that we discussed, our tiredness, etc. Food, the time, distance. I read it that there has to be an element of intent in that truthfulness, that if he legitimately didn't have time for review and didn't recall at the time, then I don't think that that would be sustainable. And judgment, this kind of leans more towards just a comment on the policy itself of judgment is too. If I agree with this evidence, it's too vague of a policy, it's a reasonable person standard, which you can drive a truck through. Because there is no actual standard of what is reasonable. So in the officer's report, he states X, Y, and Z is what I noticed, but it could also be that it wasn't that bad and that they did give a reason other than a Dewey reason. So I think I am going to go with insufficient evidence for both. We'll get looking.
Before I do my adjudication recommendation, I think I wanna, say one last thing about the policy recommendation here, and that is that perhaps we should strike truthfulness as a policy if we're never gonna be able to apply it. I mean, I don't believe officers are incapable or inept, which is why we should have high standards. And I think particularly this is the case because, being cross-examined might be the work of police work also, right? At some point, you're gonna be called and, what I think is that, maybe there's a policy or training recommendation there and, we have officers do some, some role play and practice being cross-examined. It's not easy or fun. My mom's an attorney, so I got cross-examined a lot. And it does feel, it does raise your heart rate and activate your central nervous system and make you feel under attack, but that is the work of policing also. I also want to say that the attorney in the email said the attorney no longer feels they can put officer on the stand. Again, this seems to me, I'm not saying that I'm not mentioning this for the severity of what's going on here, but to say that this is going to come up again. And we need officers to be ready to be cross-examined. And I just hear a lot of us bending this policy based upon that they were tired and hungry. And I'm just still not sure how that informs whether this kind of fundamental discrepancy here, Was impairment suspected when the officer contacted the defendant, or was impairment suspected when observing the driving? Which is what the officer A said on page 4 of the, I think. Yeah. The full document, yeah. So that's a big discrepancy. That's not, I don't. As I read it and again, think about what it means to live in a body that's not perfect and not doing what I wanna do. I don't know how I see this. I'm also really pissy about this not sustained thing from the auditor, and that's. It makes doing the discussion work here a little bit more difficult, but I'm gonna say sustained on truthfulness and insufficient evidence on judgment. I tend to be a thorny person in general, so.
Jose, maybe just to be able to inform my own thinking about this, can you describe why you think it's such a what the huge discrepancy is again, and why it causes you so much concern? Sorry to
Yeah, so
ask you to say exactly.
as I was, yeah, no problem. So the section review of transcript of proceedings, Office of Administrative Hearings, it starts on page 3 of the final full document, and am I allowed to see judge's name? Should I not? The judge asks, okay, and what was I know you described what you observed, but what was your basis for the traffic stop? The witness. Officer.
Yeah.
Initially, they caught my attention by traveling across multiple lanes quickly, but ultimately the reason for the stop was their driving over, not maintaining lane of travel, driving over the yellow line that indicated left part of the lane. Judge, okay, and any other reason for the stop? Officer A, well, also the driving, the bouncing back and forth and almost striking the curb multiple times was very concerning. And I suspected impairment at that time. And if I'm reading all this like deluge of information correctly, that's different than when later they said that they suspected it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. When they approached the view, after they talked to the person or the defendant. So in the absence or with the addition of a missing conversation in the car, where there was 5 minutes of body worn footage being turned off, which is a pattern here that we've observed. I think, I don't know, it's a natural human tendency to expect the worst in the absence of information, but I'm trying not to do that, but now I can't.
You can't unsee the blank.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so maybe we just disagree.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I was trying to get to your side, but I think I can't. So, I think that the discrepancy for me is not wide enough to merit an idea about truthfulness, and I actually think it's irresponsible of the city prosecutor to have flagged that so deliberately in their communication about this, from my perspective. Unless I am not, and I will caveat this by saying, I'm not as prepared as normally I am, please. But I did read through a lot of it and I sort of feel like I get the gist, and I do think it was worth investigating to sort of make sure that that claim from the prosecutor's office was or was not founded. And it appears that it is not sustained by anyone involved, including the EPD chain of command chief and the auditor and auditor's office. And I agree with that idea generally, in terms of the adjudications. What I want to sort of push back on is this idea that like it's not possible to have a different, well, that it's not likely even to have a different memory in a testimony than when you were on the scene, and that it is, let me not speak in negatives. I think it is likely to have a different memory of an incident, especially after more of the incident occurred after your part of it was done. then when you're testifying in the future, you have all of that information to go from, and therefore your testimony may influenced by that. I think that's highly likely, and that's why I think officers need support in testifying to know, they aren't an attorney. They didn't prepare as an attorney. They have prepared to be a cop. And there are CIT trainings to be a cop. There are uses of force training to be a cop, and there's legal training to be a cop, but they are generalists. And an attorney is a specific role that obviously depends, or whatever the attorney was who was there questioning the officer. I don't know if that's a defense attorney because they were on the defensive side of this hearing, but they are trained to ask questions to get confusion into the door. So that,
Just to clarify, this is the judge asking this question.
okay, so the judge is also an attorney who is, trying to get the truth, or the administrative official is trained as an attorney by the law
Yeah.
people in the room. Is that true? I don't know.
Usually
Are
the
the DMV
ALJ.
ALJs?
You get
Yeah.
Yeah,
attorneys?
usually.
Yeah.
Right.
Admin courts are weird.
Okay,
They're weird.
okay,
Yeah,
things I
they're
don't.
very different.
Yeah. So I just think like I don't think we can expect cops to be officers, law enforcement officials to be an attorney also. I know one who is, and that's the only one. They were like a unicorn. So I think that the discrepancy is not so wide for me to feel like this is a truthfulness issue, but there is some questions in there, and I think insufficient evidence is an appropriate outcome for that, because the facts aren't the same in the two statements, and so you gotta figure out, I think there's not enough evidence to say that that is meeting the definition of the truthfulness policy as a violation. From my perspective. Judgment, I actually have some questions about judgment of closing a case and issuing a citation when you do have some suspicion of a DUI, and that sort of goes along with, I think we should be very strict about DUIs. And the judgment, I think, in this is sort of shrouded, or sorry, is sort of, the judgment questions in this, I think, are overshadowed by the truthfulness questions in the investigation and in the sort of discussion as well. I do wonder, like, what is the line that officers are, thinking through when they either issue a citation or pursue the investigation? We didn't talk a lot about that, so I'm not gonna ask. That's the area where I don't feel like I read enough to be able to ask and assert and all that stuff. So I think it's insufficient evidence. I think that's an appropriate adjudication. That's it.
I will say, I, on truthfulness, came in here ready to, I was at the beginning pretty prepared to say sustained. I felt like they were pretty far apart hearing the discussion. I moved more into the insufficient evidence camp. While obviously it is a concern to city prosecutor's office, it is concerning that, at the scene, it's officers kind of talking about, well, she talked pretty clearly, relatively clearly, and not really observing seemingly enough. And then at the ALJ stage kind of has a different tone of like, I suspected it when I made the stop. That to me is pretty far apart, but obviously there's also, as has been talked about, where people are hungry and tired, and our memories change, and attorneys are a wily bunch, and so possibly that threw him off. We didn't talk about judgment much. I would move insufficient evidence, or I would recommend the insufficient evidence on truthfulness. On judgment, I think I have to maybe part ways on within policy. When there's other officers at the stand, observing suspect is tanked, observing that, this is a talking about someone who is under the age to consume alcohol, which means that for DUI, we aren't talking about legal limit of 0.08. We're talking any alcohol in a under 21 system. to me, it's hard. And then obviously the issues with the pass off. And so I think on the judgment piece, I would say sustained.
All right, for truthfulness, I opted for insufficient evidence. For me, it just didn't seem deliberate. Deliberately trying to be misleading. And then, I don't know that I have an answer for judgment. I thought I did, and then you all are confusing me. But, I just wanted to point out that there was, I can't keep track of which officer, one of the other officers, it's not the main officer, the question here, attributed the behavior as lazy. And I think that was quoted a couple of times, and I felt concerned in reading it that there was some influence of thought from that statement and observation from that other officer, which felt inappropriate to me. And then also I just noted and heard again tonight that probable cause does not look the same to every officer. It was quoted by like everybody involved in the case, it seemed. And so that for me, initially made me think within policy for judgment, but I'm leaving it blank if I'm allowed to do that.
All right. We move now to the auditor's report.
I'm not the auditor.
Don't have much to say. So I can basically tell you since I arrived, 2 weeks ago, I think. I've been spending a lot of time reaching out, meeting different community members, government officials, members of the EPD, and starting to gather a good idea of the office. I think I've invited to meet all of you at one point or another, and I'm still willing to make that time on the schedule. And that's about all I can really say. I'll get to know you more individually one-on-one, but I'm looking forward to working with this group.
Thank you.
Not your normal auditor's report that you'll get every month, but I don't know if Lindsay wants to put anything that's happened before I came on board.
I'm happily receding into the background. So there's still a couple open cases that you all will hear more about that came up over the summer. I think both of them were started to be generated in early July, late June, so we'll end up talking more about flock cameras and how those have processed through the system in terms of those complaints, and then also I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the July call out. There was a number of community complaints concerning EPD's response to a call from ICE. And we will have all of those things wrapped up and can report on them soon, but they're still in process right at this moment. So that's why you're hearing about them. They haven't hit your closed cases reports yet. But more on that later.
I'm happy to answer any questions, but kind of like jumping in board. It's a bit of a learning curve, so. Any questions for me? Okay.
All right, we move now to public comment. And should I still preamble?
You don't need to, because we don't have any online comments.
Okay.
It's just this one, so you can give the usual.
Yeah.
I can be the timekeeper. if that's
Okay.
helpful.
Public comments, should be limited to 5 minutes.
Sorry, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, excuse me.
5 minutes total, in case there was more than one person. If you're wondering what I'm asking. It's
And we
questionable.
cannot speak about the case that we were reviewing.
Correct, and that
today.
is not a conflict in this case, so we're okay.
Great. At this time, I'd like to invite Carol. To.
Brown to Will.
Absolutely, and your time starts now.
Yep, somebody, I got a copy for everybody, because I don't talk well, but
I'll be happy to read it into the record
Okay.
for you if that's what you want, no problem.
yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Craig, you're the auditor that dismissed the case that I'm You know, they said I can go to the board, so. I just got an email from you today and then last week, so, okay, I'll be quiet.
So she said the auditor classified my complaint as a service complaint and dismissed and closed it on 9/4/25. I believe this complaint should be classified as a community impact case for the following reasons. Bias, disparate treatment, violation of constitutional rights. The crimes observed as I see them. We have 2 videos that were sent to the auditor of surveillance camera footages. One was a city cam obtained by our attorney's investigator. The other footage from the front door surveillance camera of the Lucky's Club subpoenaed by our victim's attorney, showing that 2 of the 4 violent assaults to both Nate, is it Dinah, is that right? Dina, sorry, I apologize. On July 15th, the hearing was set at court where Charlie Davis, bartender, bouncer, manager of Lucky's Club, had claimed to the prosecutor he had surveillance cameras showing what happened in the club. The night before the hearing, our attorneys were told the interior videos had been inadvertently erased and were destroyed evidence, quote unquote. On July 18th, Nate and Dina's case were dismissed in the interest, and this is a quote, in the interest of justice signed by all. Nate and Dina being arrested was a violation of their constitutional rights. It took me over a month after receiving the court subpoenaed video, combined with our investigator obtained city cam, police reports, witness statements, and all additional information I uncovered to realize how truly disturbing this unjust arrest was. I timestamped the videos I had with the police cams to clear up what happened. As it was a chaotic scene. So the first, it says number 1 crime, colluded with conspired, see subpoenaed video outside front door, Charlie Davis talking with male, female assaulters after 2 assaults to Nate and one to Dina. Number 2 crime, attempted to cover up assaulters leaving the scene, see Kawasaki cam, Charlie distracted by male assaulters leaving scene, but says nothing to Officer Kawasaki. Number 3 crime, false statements, quote unquote, lied to police. Charlie Davis is the only person Kawasaki spoke to on the scene after 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Gets on police radio to report PC, probable cause to arrest Nate and Dina. Number 4 crime, disparate treatment bias. Assaulter N. Robertson and later his wife to Officer Davis and Collier points out to Kawasaki and other officers on scene that he DJs the police Christmas parties and is a 5th grade teacher, and Robertson tells Kawasaki and Collier that Nate entered the women's restroom, which made it weird. Kawasaki in his reporting officer narrative and amended report states Officer Davis advised him of this statement. Kawasaki cam was also listening. Kawasaki then writes this, and then it says libels to further disparate Nate on front page of these reports. I have a witness statement for 225 that Nate was standing at the pinball machines when the incident began. We did not have a copy of the police report until 4/11/25. Number 5 crime, compliance of other officers on scene. I do not know how this can be addressed within the police department. Thank you for your consideration. Carol, can you say your last name for me? Pecoraro, thank you. Sorry that I didn't read that very
No,
clearly.
you do it better than I could. I mean, my concern, the kids that got off, it was dismissed. Cost me $10,000, and there's so many people out there that don't have that kind of money to stop this. It's not a horrible crime, it was a, what's that, minimal thing. But it's still happening. When we were in the courts, there was another case out there at the Lucky's bar, the same, basically a similar situation. So I don't know, I mean, I am tickled to have the police officers here because, you know, I mean, I just want it solved. I don't want this to ever happen. Those kids, they were traumatized, you know, it was a horrible situation, and they could have been in the criminal justice system. They're 24 and 21 years old for the rest of their lives. That's a criminal, you know, assault on them. So not to mention they were assaulted, you know, my grandson was assaulted 3 times that night and his girlfriend was assaulted twice by a 5th grade teacher in his Bible grade.
No, 20 seconds remaining.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't see that good. But again, I am just tickled that everybody's here and you're so involved. You know, I mean, I'm impressed, you know, as a citizen to be here. And I thank you all, the police as well. I just wanted to report that.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you guys reopen or what, I don't know what happens, I just, again, I just read the website.
Would you like to open up discussion about this right now?
I mean,
We
do your
can,
closing comments,
we
so that
can-
would make sense.
Sure, yeah, we can include this as part of our closing comments and as far as our range of abilities go, we have the ability to review the intake.
Craig has all the information, I sent it all to him, yeah, because I took a month to put it all together. So,
Thank you. I think I start closing comments as I put on you, Noah, to kick off the
That's
adjudication.
In a
Round
circle,
robin.
it's your turn.
It always comes back around. My closing comments tonight are of gratitude for the EPD officers who are here and I'm assuming that you're not on the clock right now. So I just wanted to say I appreciate your generosity and I wanted to point that out that you're not here on the clock for those who might be watching or in attendance and just say that I appreciate your time and effort in putting this together. Thanks for holding open a space where we can have difficult conversations and come to different conclusions.
Yeah, ditto to what Jose said, and I think. It would be helpful to review the intake for this case, just so that we can be part of the community that's also sort of responding to community comments. So thanks, Carol, for joining us. I will say, my understanding is that there's not a perceived violation of policy, that's why that you would get a response. That this is perhaps a service complaint as opposed to a policy violation within
I
the.
just watch TV.
Yeah.
But there.
Yeah, so I think that's what I'll look for when I see the intake is whether the auditor's office sort of was able to perceive some policy violation that they would have suggested be investigated. Yeah, happy to be back and with you all. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, echoing similar sentiments, it was, a lot of moving parts tonight, a lot of good discussion. We didn't, a lot of us did not come down in the same place, but I think I like that this group gets to not come down in the same place and then, all still get to continue to do this work, do important work. Thank you all for being here. It's, we have lots of questions and, they're civilian questions and obviously it's a very different perspective on the other side. So thank you for that. And, look forward, thank you all for your support for vice chair. It's a hard progress.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add is I really appreciate hearing from Officer Rankin about CIT. And I'm just gonna be stoked whenever mental health is brought into this space intentionally, so thank you for that and the work that you all do.
Well, it's all been said, so what is there to add? Except can we never do an administrative law case again?
Thank you all. I think we will review the intake. And Lindsay, do you think it will be a part of next month's packet?
It would be easy to make it part of your packet, so yeah, not a problem.
So we'll make time in our meeting next month to
To
discuss
discuss
that. This is the first time that I've ever reviewed an intake. So in terms of making recommendations and policy, I'll look forward to connecting with you and Craig on that. I think Elise and I will look forward to doing that. Congratulations, Elise.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Still wanna?
All right, it is 7:35. We're adjourning 5 minutes early. Way to stay on schedule. All right.